The smell of smoke still clings to her hair. 3 days since the walls fell, and Melina can still taste ash on her tongue, still feel the heat of burning timber against her skin, even though the fires are now 100 miles behind her. She is 26 years old. She is the wife of Hippocrates, strategos of the Athenian forces at Decelea. She was, until 72 hours ago, one of the most respected women in Athens, mistress of a household with 14 slaves, mother of 2 sons who are now almost certainly dead. Now she stands in a stone courtyard in Sparta, barefoot on flagstones worn smooth by generations of feet, wearing a chiton that is not hers, that was given to her by captors who stripped away everything she owned, everything she was, with the same efficiency they applied to dismantling fortifications. Around her stand 31 other Athenian women. She counted them during the march. 31 wives, daughters, and widows of Athenian officers, collected from the ruins of Decelea like grain after harvest, sorted and transported to this place that Athenians speak of only in whispers. The courtyard is larger than she expected, clean, organized, nothing like the chaos of the sack, nothing like the blood and screaming that accompanied their capture. This is a different kind of horror, she is beginning to understand. Not the horror of violence, but the horror of system, the horror of efficiency, the horror of a process that has been refined over generations to produce specific outcomes with mechanical precision. Spartan women watch from the colonnade. Melina can see them in the shadows, observing the new arrivals with expressions she cannot read. They do not look sympathetic. They do not look cruel. They look evaluating, assessing, the way a horse trader examines stock before auction. A man approaches from the far end of the courtyard. He is perhaps 50 years old, his body still hard with the muscle that Spartans maintain until death, his face bearing scars that map decades of warfare. He does not introduce himself. He does not need to. The crimson cloak marks him as one of the homoi, the equals, a full Spartan citizen with rights that extend to everything within the borders of Laconia. Including, Melina is beginning to understand, her. He stops 10 feet from the group and speaks in a dialect of Greek that sounds harsh to Athenian ears, consonants bitten off, vowels flattened, every word stripped to its essence. "You are no longer Athenians," he says. "You are no longer wives. You are no longer mothers. Athens has fallen. Your husbands are dead or enslaved. Your children are scattered. Everything you were is gone." Melina feels the woman beside her begin to shake. She wants to reach out, to offer comfort, but she does not move. She has learned already that movement attracts attention, and attention in Sparta is never kind to foreigners. "You are now property of the Lacedaemonian state," the man continues. "Not slaves. Slaves have value only for labor. You have different value. You will be distributed according to the needs of the city. Some of you will be assigned to Spartan households as secondary wives. Some will be given to the Crypteia for training purposes. Some will serve in the temples. Some will be used for breeding." The word lands like a physical blow. Breeding. Melina has heard stories about Spartan practices, whispered tales that Athenians told each other to explain how their enemies could be so different, so inhuman, so terrifyingly effective in war. She dismissed most of them as propaganda, as the natural exaggeration that enemies engage in to make sense of their defeats. She is no longer certain the stories were exaggerated. "The process will begin tomorrow," the man says. "Tonight you will be fed and housed. You will be examined by physicians. You will be assessed by the E4's representatives. Based on these assessments, assignments will be made." He turns and walks away without waiting for response, without acknowledging that he has just reduced 32 human beings to categories of use. The Spartan women emerge from the colonnade. They are not gentle. They do not speak more than necessary. They separate the Athenian women into groups of 8, lead them to different buildings around the courtyard, begin the process that the man described. Melina is taken to a room that contains a stone table, a basin of water, and an older woman who tells her to remove her clothing. The examination that follows is thorough, clinical, and utterly dehumanizing. The woman checks her teeth like a horse buyer, examines her hips with hands that probe without apology, asks questions about her menstrual cycles, her pregnancies, her age at first marriage, whether her sons were healthy. Melina answers because she understands that refusing will not stop the process, will only make it worse. She answers because she is beginning to understand that Sparta does not care about her resistance, her dignity, her humanity. Sparta cares only about function, utility, outcome. When the examination is complete, the woman makes marks on a wax tablet. She does not tell Melina what the marks mean. She simply gestures toward a door at the back of the room, beyond which Melina can hear other women crying. "Tomorrow you will be assigned," the woman says. "Rest tonight. You will need your strength for what comes next. What you are about to learn has been systematically obscured by 25 centuries of scholarship that preferred to focus on Spartan military achievement rather than Spartan domestic practices. The historians who wrote admiringly of Thermopylae and the 300, who praised Spartan discipline and Spartan valor, chose not to examine too closely what that discipline required, what that valor was built upon, what happened to the women and children and conquered peoples who made the Spartan war machine possible. Tonight, you will learn what Sparta actually did to captured enemy wives. Not the sanitized version that textbooks provide, not the romantic interpretation that sees Spartans as noble warriors defending Greek civilization, but the documented reality preserved in sources that scholars have traditionally dismissed or ignored because acknowledging them would complicate the heroic narrative. You will learn about the distribution system that assigned captured women to Spartan households based on breeding potential. You will learn about the Crypteia, the secret society of young Spartan warriors who used captured women for training purposes that ancient sources describe only in euphemisms. You will learn about the temple assignments, where women considered too old or too damaged for breeding were given to religious institutions that practiced forms of worship Athens would have considered obscene. You will learn why Spartan warriors were forbidden from marrying until age 30, and what they did during the 15 years between completing their military training and being permitted to take wives. You will learn about the wife-sharing customs that allowed any Spartan citizen to request access to another citizen's wife for breeding purposes, and how this same custom was applied, with modifications, to captured foreigners. You will learn about the children born from these arrangements, where they went, what they became, how the Spartan state created new categories of person, neither citizen nor slave nor free, to accommodate the offspring of enemy women and Spartan warriors. You will learn why ancient sources consistently describe Sparta as a place where women had more freedom than anywhere else in Greece, and why this description, while technically accurate, conceals a horror that most historians have been unwilling to confront directly. Subscribe if you want to understand the darkness that powered history's most celebrated military culture. Comment below telling me where you are watching from. Because Melina is still waiting in that room, still hearing other women crying through the walls, still not knowing what assignment means, what breeding means, what the next months and years of her life will contain. And I am going to tell you exactly what happened to her. But before I reveal what the Spartans did to the wives of their defeated enemies, before I explain the system that had been perfected over 4 centuries to break Athenian women and rebuild them as instruments of Spartan reproduction, I need to take you back. I need to show you how Sparta became what it was. I need to explain the psychology of a society that could process human beings with the same dispassion they applied to forging weapons. Because you cannot understand what happened to Melina without understanding what created the men who did it to her. Sparta was not born monstrous. It became monstrous through deliberate design, through generations of social engineering that produced warriors unlike any the ancient world had seen, warriors whose effectiveness in combat was matched only by their capacity for systematic cruelty. The transformation began around 650 BCE, nearly 2.5 centuries before Melina's capture, when Sparta faced an existential crisis. The city had conquered the fertile region of Messenia, enslaving its population to work the land that fed Spartan citizens. But the Messenians revolted, and the war that followed nearly destroyed Sparta. The city survived, barely, and its leaders drew a conclusion that would shape everything that came after. Never again would Sparta be vulnerable. Never again would Spartans concern themselves with farming, commerce, art, philosophy, or any of the other activities that made other Greek cities vibrant and creative and weak. Sparta would become a pure military society, every aspect of existence subordinated to a single purpose, producing warriors capable of maintaining control over a hostile, enslaved population that outnumbered Spartans 10-1. The system they created was called the agoge, which means upbringing or raising, a term that conceals the reality of what it actually involved. Every Spartan male child was examined at birth by a council of elders. Those judged weak or deformed were taken to a place called Apothete, a chasm on Mount Taygetus, and thrown to their deaths. Those who passed this first examination were allowed to remain with their mothers until age 7. At 7, everything changed. The boys were taken from their families and placed in communal barracks where they would live until age 30. They were organized into groups called agalai, herds, a term that indicates exactly how Spartans viewed their children. Not as individuals to be nurtured, but as livestock to be shaped into useful form. The training that followed was designed to produce specific psychological results. The boys were deliberately underfed, forcing them to steal food to survive. If caught stealing, they were beaten, not for stealing, but for being caught. The lesson was clear. Cunning and deception were virtues. Failure was the only crime. Getting caught meant you were not clever enough to be Spartan. They were given only one cloak per year, regardless of weather. They slept on rushes, they gathered themselves from the river. They were beaten regularly by older boys and by adult supervisors, not as punishment for specific offenses, but as general conditioning to endure pain without complaint. A Spartan who cried out under the lash was considered unworthy of citizenship. They fought each other constantly, not play fighting, but genuine combat that produced injuries and occasionally deaths. The survivors were the ones who learned to channel violence effectively, who could switch from calm to lethal in an instant, who felt no hesitation about causing harm to others. And they were systematically denied normal human attachments. No families, no personal property, no privacy, no individual identity beyond their position in the military hierarchy. The boys were taught that sentiment was weakness, that love made you vulnerable, that the only loyalty worth having was loyalty to Sparta itself, an abstraction that demanded everything and gave back only the privilege of dying in its service. By the time a Spartan male reached 18, he had spent 11 years in this environment. He had been beaten, starved, frozen, forced to fight, denied every comfort that normal human development requires. He had watched